Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Dissolving the Divide, where Derek, my co host and producer, and I are working at bringing up topics where people are divided, and we are attempting to dissolve those divides to bring harmony and freedom to more of us in the world. And today we have a really special guest, Anjali Romaniuk. She is a coach and spiritual mentor of women. She's doing some amazing work, especially with retreats coming up. And I'm going to have her share a little bit more about that, and we'll share all the links. But today we're going to talk about a very important topic of the division between women. And so let's hop into that. Anjali, please start by just sharing a little bit about what brought you on your path work here.
Yeah, hello. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me, and hello to everyone who's listening in. My journey really began. My journey really began in 2018 when I went to a yoga teacher training. It was my 500-hour yoga teacher training in Bali, and I had experienced my first taste of sisterhood ever. Prior to that experience, my relationship around women was very wounded. I felt a lot of competition within women, a lot of jealousy between my friends, just a lot of cattiness, tons of drama, talking behind each other's backs, stealing each other's boyfriends, just the typical stuff that a lot of women experience within relationships with other women. And while I was at this experience in Bali doing my yoga teacher training, the women that were there, and it wasn't just all women, there were men that were there too, but the women who were there, it was so obvious that the energy field was a lot different because we were all there with an intention of learning, an intention of developing ourselves spiritually, and an intention of knowing ourselves more in depth. And what I found was that there was actually no drama. I was there for a whole month and a half, and there was no drama between the women. Me and my roommates just bonded so beautifully. And after I came home, it was like I was just changed woman. There was also this experience. I'm just going to say this because I feel that it's relevant. There's a lot of women comparison, especially with our bodies, and it's a whole industry, right, trying to shape women's bodies to almost look like replicas of one specific standard. And I had dealt with a lot of body image issues before leading up to that retreat, and something that I got to experience on that retreat was being around women naked for like one of the first times in my life, and there being no like weirdness about it.
No body shaming.
No body shaming, and no guilt, no anything. And it wasn't even a big deal. It was like a total natural, normal thing. There was a lot of women from Europe who were there. Like it was just a whole thing that I had never experienced before outside of being in like a gym locker room where I felt like I always had to cover myself. And I have this really specific memory of being out at the pool with all these women, and I couldn't stop looking at all of these women and the different shapes and details of their bodies, and how unique every single woman was, and how unique I was, and how I was never going to be able to look like one of those women, and they were never going to be able to look like me. And there was so much divinity in that realization that I had. Now, anyway, I came back from that trip totally changed. My old friendships started to fall off one by one because I was no longer available for superficial female relationships or romantic relationships, but I was just no longer available for that sense of relating that was built in drama and no responsibility.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, very profound insights that came from that. And I can certainly relate, to this. I'm sure most women have had stories or experiences of feeling hurt, in the relationships with their female friends, and feeling jealousy and envy and competition. And what a relief, what a beautiful experience to be in a setting where you don't have that and you
Yeah.
can come together. So what would you say are what is the greatest gift and the benefit and the power of women coming together in that non-competitive atmosphere?
There's so many benefits of women coming together in a conscious way. I mean, one of the things is just safety, like being able to experience safety amongst other women opens this door for so many new things to come forward, for us to be able to express truth to ourselves for the first time, things that we had been lying to ourselves about, things that we're holding back, things that we're keeping secrets. When we're around other women and we're holding space for each other, there's a sense of felt safety within the group and the collective of just being able to like be in that authenticity. There's group collaboration where we can begin to like build our dreams and ideas and actually help each other. It's very different than this world that we live in right now, which is you have to do it by yourself. You can't tell anybody your ideas or else they're going to get stolen. You have to watch your back all the time. It's more of, wow, we come together, we share ideas, and maybe she can, give some of her gifts into this idea, and maybe she can help in this way, and maybe I can help in this way, and it's so much more of a collaborative experience. Yeah, and another thing is just, being able to heal, like deeply heal from our past experiences within other relationships with women, and our relationships and our childhood trauma, and just this general sense of relatability that happens of I can feel that and I can see you in that. And yeah, and it's different actually. It's like we don't have to coddle each other, and we hold each other to this higher standard of, I see your strength, I see your wisdom, I see your beauty, and you don't deserve this, and you can move through this, and I trust that you can move through this. Instead of,
Yeah.
yeah, instead of being like, oh no, I have to take care of you, I have to hold all of this for you, I have to, teach you the ways of how to get out of the situation. It's like, it's a lot different. It's like, no, like you are going to figure this out. I believe in you.
It's like coming together with your raw self, everyone equal, right?
Yes.
In your
No
rawness and your
hierarchy.
vulnerability.
Yeah.
And so no one's there to, and, necessarily like be the fixer or the rescuer, hopefully, and those kind of dynamics, I imagine, do come out. And I'm wondering, how do you approach those dynamics when codependency and rescuing tendencies come out amid like your retreat, for example?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to name it. I mean, it's the most uncomfortable thing that we can do, but usually, like, if it doesn't go named, then it just festers like a wound. And so, being able to call it forward, either privately or in the group, and have, women and humans in general, but women have a really large capacity to see themselves and witness the patterns that they are living in and the things that they're repeating, and being able to see that and then choose a different path. Because oftentimes when we're stuck in patterns of codependency, people pleasing, rescuing, making ourselves smaller, we're living in a child, like that's the child living through us. It's not the woman living through us. And so we have to be able to see that and just name it and say, like, what's coming up for you right now?
Yeah.
How do you want to respond to this in a way that you feel empowered and embodied instead of small and scared?
So there's a whole new approach, actually, and
Yeah,
skill set.
totally. So, can we get into the causal factors of, like, we got issues going on between women, and you guys are like jumping before, like,
Yeah, we are.
I love it, like get into the solutions and all that good stuff. But so I mean, right then and there, like the whole mother father aspect and what's being projected through the young woman with her fellow sisterhood, or What's the equivalent of brethren? It's not sisterin, or is it? Close
Sister-
enough. But
Sister.
there's a
That's
lot of
our new one.
issues unresolved within, yeah, there's the little girl aspect that has not been able to mother herself because, she was born within, unconscious parents, whether it be the mother or father. And there's, those whole dynamics and the whole shadow work aspect and the animus and anima that have not been integrated, activated, and all those things that need to be situated for each and every individual, whether male or female.
Yeah.
And you see these things being played out in so many ways. And for me, growing up, like even 20 years ago, getting my first restaurant job, working at some microbrewery, where there was like a lopsided amount of females in the workspace and not that many males, and like having like at least half a dozen come up to me individually here and there, like, oh, I'm so thankful there's another guy working with us. There's so many women here. We don't know how to deal with
We need the
ourselves.
masculine structure,
And I'm like,
please.
yo, like, I had so much love for the feminine essence. I'm like, I thought y'all were like really cool with each other and like things were all better than hunky dory. Like, that's such a crap term, but you know what I mean? Like, like we're all getting along and like
Yeah.
we're all beautiful. Like,
Yeah, you're like, why are y'all arguing? Like, what's
at the
wrong?
time.
Yeah.
What do you think, Anjali, in terms of the root causes of this dynamic?
Well, in my experience, I think that something that's really permeated through feminine harshness towards one another is, and just in general, like a really big wound in the feminine that plays out in a multitude of ways, is that the feminine really wants to be seen in her essence. That's like her desire is to be seen. So if there's a child, like in childhood, if we grow up and we're ignored, if we're abandoned, if we're not seen, if that need, that core need isn't met in childhood, the child part of ourself will continue trying to like act that out in our adulthood lives. And this wound of trying to be seen plays out in so many different ways. I mean, and just for example, like one way of trying to be seen is you see women who have, there's a difference between taking up space in a really like embodied full way, and then there's like taking up space in an obnoxious, loud, aggressive way that we often see. And that's very true. Like you can feel when someone's energy is grasping at you and like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And the difference between an invitation of like, I'm here, you can see me. I know you can see me.
Yeah.
So we can feel that. We can feel that between women of like this competition of like, I want to be seen, and no, I want to be seen. Or even like I said, like like going after each other's boyfriends in this really just vile, intense way. Or trying to get louder over each other, winning arguments. Yeah, it plays out in all of those ways. And really, when we dig down deep, there's a little child inside that's like, I just want to be seen and I just want to be loved. But it's the woman's responsibility to meet that need and to almost reparent and remother herself, so it isn't being projected out onto all of this that's around her.
Yes, yes. I think that the importance of women, of every woman recognizing the little unhealed little girl in her, the importance of this is vital for, I think, for all of humanity. I mean, I think it's very big, because the health of a woman has a lot to do with the health of a relationship between a man and a woman, between any kind of romantic relationship. It will play out into the health of their parenting, of their mothering, and has so many implications on, the future. So the more healthy that women are within themselves and among themselves, I think the more healthy our world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I can relate a bit to, my childhood was more, I would say a little more on the neglectful side, where I didn't really feel seen. And I tended to be very withdrawn from relationships with, when I had a few best friends, but I very easy can withdraw. And what I've found is that one of the most healthy transformations in my life was developing a core group of women that I meet with monthly. And it's a very intimate group where we share, around the most personal things, including our relationships. Prior to this, I would be in relationship and there'd be problems, but I wouldn't share it with anyone, which led to me perpetuating toxic patterns.
Absolutely.
Because I wasn't allowing myself to get the feedback from women because it didn't feel perhaps safe, right? It was foreign. But now we share very openly, and we're like, it's so unconditionally accepting because we all know, like, our we just accept each other in these stories that we share and understand, the intentions. And so it's very healing, I would say.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that you also said, Leslie, that your response to neglect in childhood was to go inward. And I think that's also
Mhm.
important to note, is that can also be like right on the different side of the pendulum is that reaction of almost the narrative that I don't belong, that I can't
Mhm.
be around women. And that's really important to look at too, of just like isolating, or sometimes we see the types of women who gravitate towards mostly male dominated relationships or friendships with men, because that like connection with their feminine essence is just it's not really as present.
Mhm.
But
Right, right.
coming
Much more vulnerable to getting in codependent relationships with men or abusive relationships, I think.
yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, coming into those pockets, those like safe pockets of relationships with women, and giving yourself a chance to be heard. I mean, when I'm hosting circles, I've hosted women's circles, I host retreats, and one of the biggest values that I have in those experiences is collective safety. And within that is giving every single woman the opportunity to speak, even if she doesn't want to speak. It's never required, but to go around the circle, and that's why we always sit in circles, is like to go around the circle and to just look each woman in the eye and say, is there anything that you want to share? Is there anything that you want to name? Is there anything that you want to speak to in this moment? So she knows that she can if she wants to. It's like she doesn't have to fight for her place to speak. It's available to her when she's ready to take it.
Yeah, I think that's important too, that you're pointing out that all people, include that women in this context, we each have our different pacing around our sharing. And some people speak really fast and can be very dominating, and others need space and time and silence even to feel safe enough to speak. And I think that is also another dynamic, right, in us coming together, is recognizing, one, our own patterns maybe of cutting off people or not being attuned, and listening. Do you find that having a facilitator or a coach in this area, is really needed? What are the advantages, like, to having that witness to this process and opening up women together?
It's a great question. I think that it's not always necessary for there to be a
Mhm.
specific leader or facilitator. I don't really like using the word leader, but facilitator. Um, for just someone who can set the base tone and intention of the reason for coming together, for someone to kind of hold the space when it gets challenging. Um, but
Mhm.
I also believe that there's space for each woman to learn how to lead themselves. And I think that the more often that women come into spaces and circles like that, I mean, most women don't really know what to do. It's like they're invited to a women's circle. They're like, what the hell is this going to be about? What am I getting myself into? Am I going to have to do all these things? And so someone who's leading the circle, facilitating, is kind of like just directing the time, directing what we're going to be doing, what we're going to be talking about. And then that is an invitation for the women who join to learn those tools by being in that experience and then taking those tools and learning how to teach their own circles and facilitate their own experiences with women. So I think that it's a very grounded practice in like reciprocity, like giving to you and then you giving back, and then like it's a beautiful teaching opportunity. And
I love that imagery. Yeah. I was thinking about this history that women have of coming together in circles.
Mm-hmm.
And full moon circles, new moon circles, quilting circles, you know, yeah, yeah. And I think, do you have any thought? Have you done study on that history, or have thoughts about why that's so feminine in its history?
I haven't done research on the circle, but intuitively the circle to me is just a symbol of one, continuum, and two, like, I don't really like using this word, but a sense of equality, a sense of inclusivity, in like a very aligned way, like inclusivity in an aligned way where we can all see each other, where there is no specific person in the middle or there's no specific person in the front, but we're all in unison and in the experience together. And yeah, I think that the history behind circles and women coming together in circles is something along the lines of that.
Yeah,
I'm not totally sure. Have you done any research on it?
I would say in not in an in-depth way, but in the sense of, knowing that when we go back in our roots to, women were operating together, in day-to-day tasks and had ritual together, around nature, around the seasons, and were often very vital in, that provided a function in the community. I think women coming together had function and purpose for a community.
Yeah. Am I included in this conversation, by the way? Like,
Yes, you are, Greg.
sorry, but hey, like, so we have to bring up the gynocracy if we're going to go back that far away. And if you want to take it way the fuck back, millennia, like before this earth was, seeded with these types of human consciousnesses, there was Maldek, which is now the asteroid belt, which is now a piece, a huge chunk, which is the moon orbiting our earth. And that's a direct attack on not just the whole of humanity, but especially the feminine. Because before the moon was even in orbit, females were not subjected to, this menstrual cycle. And it's not a sexist word, menstrual. It means mensuel, which is monthly in French. Menstrual, that's what that means. That's where the term comes from. A monthly cycle. Y'all were not supposed to have that, way back before millennia. And even like 9 months pregnant, it wasn't that long. And there were, yes, sacred ceremonies where women, really led each other to facilitate that. You have your midwife, doulas and all that good stuff like we have today. But it was more of a celebrational thing with, more people in the community. Yeah. But as time grew on and consciousness got shattered and fragmented and the DNA got distorted, we have the rise of the gynocracy. And unfortunately, yeah, there were, in the primitive times of the whole Homo erectus, whatever, since then and all that shit. I mean, look it up. Women were banded together and they hid the fact that, they were the key to life from men.
Yeah, and there's so many theories that go with that.
From history until the present day. And just think about like all those blood sacrificial rituals, whether it be from the matriarchy or patriarchy. It's a clusterfuck of all that stuff. And maybe patriarchy is on the rise, since a century or two, whatever. And thank you, Rothschilds and all these other fuckers. But there's all this stuff that is all a residual of consciousness that we've inherited from ancestral trauma and all these things, and we're dealing with that, you know, men to men, women to women, women to men, all that stuff. So how can we dissolve those divides and really dig deep as far as one can go?
Yeah.
People are willing to go that far and willing to accept,
Right.
like, oh, women were killers, men were killers, we were all killers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how can we just dead that shit and rise above all that and kind of like make amends, be the redeemer, the neutralizer, and all those things that, you know, we can embody in this lifetime right now and crush those negative cycles.
Okay, I wanna chime back in because I'm still in the vibe. Okay, so I just
Yeah.
want to chime into a couple of things that you shared. One being this connection of women to the moon. There was a point in my journey where I was like, I love the moon, full moon, blah 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 blah. And now I'm at a place in my journey for the last like 3 years where I don't resonate with the moon anymore or any of the moon teachings. I don't teach the moon teachings to the women that I connect with. I know a lot of women ask me questions about the full moon. I often, tell them that it's an organic, it's an inorganic thing that women have actually been creating rituals around, which drain our energy. So a lot of my teachings, my teachings are earth-based teachings. My teachings are women learning about their cyclical nature and their cycles through the 4 seasons. That our monthly bleed actually has nothing to do with the moon and everything to do with what season your body is moving through. So in the past, women and even I had learned how to track my cycle through moon, the phases of the moon. And now I totally correlate with earth teachings, which has shifted my life in multitudes of ways. Way more knowledge and way more understanding and just embodiment through that line of work. The other thing that I was going to tap into was the divide between men and women, and how women were killers and men were killers. And I think that that's a really important thing to touch on too, is that matriarchy, like just how we talk about patriarchy all the time, matriarchy was a huge thing. And I mean, a disembodied form of matriarchy where women were totally overruling over men and enslaving men. And I don't know what timeline that was in, Derek, maybe you know, but I know that happened. And obviously, like, the imbalance is kind of swinging back and forth. And now even in today's world, we see women in this like uproar and so angry towards men and so like, oh, we hate men, we don't need men, blah, 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 blah. And it's like,
which is funny and ironic, because haven't you noticed they got a little too much yang up in that thing?
Yeah.
Acting very much like the patriarchs do, that's what I say.
Yeah, and I think that society and the system has done such a good job at orchestrating that as well, giving women, you can work and you can have all of these freedoms and you can have all of these things, and has really turned us into the working man. These terms like girl boss and all of these things. I mean, I have a business and like, it's great, but I don't desire to do things like a man can do them. I mean, like that, there's no part of me that wants to engage in life that way. And I think that also teaching women that the beauty that the feminine oracle has of doing things her specific way that nature oriented her to be is powerful and magical and mystical in and of itself. That you don't have to combat against the men in order to be a powerful woman.
Yeah, great, very well said, Anjali. Yeah.
And just one more thing I want to say is that, the divide that we see, most people are looking at it from like this external perspective, right? Of like, what do we need to do on the outside to change in order to heal and mend this divide? But the reason why women are so divided is because they're so divided within themselves. There's so much
Yes.
judgment within themselves. There's so much shame within themselves. There's so much shadow projection within themselves that to be in the presence of another woman, right? It's just like mirror work. You're in the presence of another woman, and something about her is bringing up something within you that you actually, it's an invitation to look at that instead of calling her wrong or shaming her or judging her.
Yes. Please share more about your process of helping women overcome shame and inner judgment.
It's a lot. It's a lot of work. I mean, like I was speaking to, a lot of it is rooted in inner child work and really excavating the parts of ourselves where we have deemed wrong, we have deemed ourselves unlovable, we have deemed ourselves too much, and really going back into those areas and just looking at it from a different perspective and from a perspective of love. And something really, really powerful that I have women do is get clear on the stories and the narratives that they're living within. So we all have these different narratives and stories that our minds created to make sense of certain situations when we were going through our younger years. And these are oftentimes very unconscious. I'll give you one specific example is a woman who I had as a client. She was interested in getting this guy's number when she went out with friends one day, and she ended up walking up to him and making conversation with him, and he ended up asking for one of her friends' phone numbers. And the story that came up with her, which was a story that we had been working through, is I'm not wanted, I'm unlovable, I'm always chosen last, nobody wants me. And when she brought this experience to me, she was in tears, she was distraught, she was heartbroken. And instead of, kind of moving her through that process and like, oh, okay, your guy, and like he'll like you and you'll be chosen. It's like my question was actually, well, what story are you making? Like what story is coming through, and what are you actually making this mean about you? What are you making
Yes.
experience mean about you right now? Because that's where the actual medicine lies, is if you can go through this experience, be like, okay, this doesn't mean anything about me or my worthiness or my deservingness.
Yeah. That's bullseye right there.
Yeah.
For pretty much every trauma affects what we think about ourselves, the meaning that we are making about our own power, about our own worthiness, right?
Absolutely.
And that narrative is vital.
Those stories can carry so much weight within us. And oftentimes we're walking through life and there's like ping, 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 so many different stories going off in our mind. And when we can start to like write them down, or we can go through an experience with a little bit more awareness and be like, I see the narrative that's coming up right now. It can be really healing. And another thing that I help women with just releasing shame and cultivating more self-intimacy, because self-intimacy is truth, is mirror work, which is a really uncomfortable practice for a lot of women, especially. I love Derek's reaction right now. He's like, yes.
I was talking about that with a good friend yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. In
how
Paris.
How many people
picnic time, like, hey, mirror time, what you know? Yeah.
And you know what's funny is there's an interesting paradox with this, because there's the paradox of like, in some ways we're obsessed with our image, we're obsessed with taking pictures, we're obsessed with walking by windows and looking at a reflection. But at the same time, to stare into your own eyes in a mirror without any makeup on, totally naked, is like the most intense experience for some women to go through. And a lot of our culture right now, I mean, it has been forever, has always been like some type of beauty standard to live up to, some different way to change yourself or shape yourself or alter yourself in order to look a specific way. And when you can have a regular practice of sitting in front of a mirror and staring into yourself and just looking into yourself and watching what your mind tries to say again, and like noticing stories that are coming up. Whose voice is that? Who said that? Is it your mother's voice? Is it your aunt's voice? Is it the television's voice? Is it Kim Kardashian's voice? Like, whose narrative is coming up when you're looking at yourself in the mirror? And can you like cut through that and go right into love and right into like radical acceptance?
Fuck yeah.
Do you have people write it down?
Sorry, Leslie, you were gonna say?
I just wondered to follow up on that. Do you have people write down those thoughts and then evaluate them? Or
I don't really evaluate. I give them space to like write things down if they want to share it with me, and they can absolutely share it with me. But just lots of reflection and lots of journaling. There's so much that can come up in an experience, and then to just like free flow write it out when you're like after the experience can often be like where some of the biggest breakthroughs happen.
Yeah. So you're giving prompts and allowing women to sort of do this in their own privacy.
Yeah.
At their own pace. Yeah. Not pressuring. Or...
Yeah. I mean, there is some times, I mean, I love working with women. I love and value the online space, but I love in-person work. And there have been moments where I have sat behind women. They didn't have to be naked, but I put a mirror in front of a woman and she sat in front of it and I sat behind her and I whispered things into her ear to say out loud to herself while holding eye contact with herself in the mirror. And I mean, just like incredible emotional releases and experiences happen in those moments.
That's
great. Yeah. And that's some really powerful mirror moments right there. I kind of did a lot of shadow work with myself, especially after being divorced and all that, and trying to figure out who am I as a man these days and all that. But I call that like those magic mirror moments, whether I was naked or not. I felt like I had to like really stare into the windows of my soul for a good minute, give myself a little pep talk, hear all that stuff and do some alchemy, even catharsis and whatever comes in those moments. And it's really just all about being honest with oneself, but being kind and compassionate with oneself as well, and just fostering and cultivating that proper love for oneself, whether or not we fucked up or failed or fell or, even did a good job, like we still got to hold ourselves large.
Yeah, absolutely. We can be, I mean, we're so critical on ourselves, and to be able to have a practice of acknowledging ourselves, congratulating ourselves, being proud is, it's such a radical way of just seeing ourselves in the way that we always desire to be seen and validated.
Yes. So there's individual shadow work, and obviously all of this is an inside job. And yet I think coming together as women and then doing some of this work side by side has an added power. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's right, the personal shadow work and then the collective shadow work, and seeing that unfold between the relationships that happen when we come together.
And then the healing from these deeper relationships than we normally experience. Yeah, that is healing in itself too. How do you think that then women, when after experiencing sort of this healing work within and then having these positive, safe experiences with other women, developing a sense of sisterhood, how do you think that changes women going back into the world and in other relationships?
I think it teaches women how to like respond in different ways and to react in different ways when they're in relationships with women. I think it also, I mean, quite like my experience, I think it begins to set women up to gain more clarity on what kind of relationships they actually want to forge. And that shifts everything. I mean, that's like you're waitressing in a bar and you're experiencing, all of these women who are just like getting off on drama and you're like, oh my, like you come back from one of these experiences, you're like, holy shit, I can't work in a bar anymore. I gotta go find another job. Like I gotta go find spaces where I can be around women who can hold their own and who do want to see themselves. And I just feel like a lot of different shifts like that begin to take place in the lives of women who come back from these experiences and just begin to make different decisions for themselves. Even the ways that they, you know, are in relationship with their mothers or their sisters or these other, you know, possible wounded relationships that they have, the dynamic begins to change. Because it doesn't take two for a dynamic to change. It just takes one person to impact the energy of a dynamic. And say if you're in a relationship with your mom and there was a lot of drama there or a lot of like shaming that you received from her, if you're showing up in that experience different and maybe like no longer tolerating that or no longer even giving energy to that, she's going to feel that, and it's going to shift the dynamic between you. And so that's how I really think of that. It heals. And I think that it also creates more spaciousness for women to begin to take more responsibility for their own self, for their own life, for their own energy, for their own everything.
Yeah. And I think what you were saying about saying no to some things that don't resonate with what they come to recognize as true about themselves and their value, right? When we value ourselves, we are going to say no to those things that push against that value, and we may exit jobs or relationships, and perhaps, you know, help women to open their eyes to kind of some sick dynamics that they may be in relationships. For example, like being with a man, let's say, who's like exploiting the dynamics of women's jealousy with each other and insecurities and pushing women against each other. And that happens all the time. And women then, rather than see this pattern, will like become catty and attack each other, right? And it diminishes everything. Right. So I think this work that you're doing with women, I think, is really so vital to women seeing their own value, to recognizing their own patterns, and then to be able to say no to these toxic and dysfunctional, you know, relationship patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. I just had a woman on the retreat in Costa Rica who showed up to the retreat, and this is like what happens, because retreat spaces are just like catalysts for like lots of transformation in a really small amount of time. But this woman showed up in the retreat, and she, you know, she within a span of 6 days, she realized all of her protective mechanisms. She like saw firsthand so many of her defense mechanisms from vulnerability. She was in the industry of lip fillers and Botox and realized that she was so out of alignment with her job, and that she was feeding into this this culture of needing to alter yourself in order for women to feel beautiful. She was like, wow, that's like really not for me anymore. And she broke up with her boyfriend in a dysfunctional relationship. And so
that's huge. Oh, be careful.
You don't know what's going to come up. You don't know like what kind of change is going to occur. But one thing that I can tell you for sure is that the change that will occur from being in a container with safe women is transformation that is the best. It's like the best kind of transformation that you can go through, even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I would imagine then you leave there with friendships and new support system.
Yes,
too.
So much support. I mean, women who have joined my very first retreat, my retreat last summer, they're still connected. They still talk to each other. They still like send me selfies while they're hanging out together in the same states. Like there's just these bonds that are made, especially from seeing each other go through these really intense emotional releases or sharing really vulnerable things that you don't forget. And then you see these women and you watch them go through their lives and you cheer them on, and they're there to talk to if you need to. And it just creates this web. Like, that's what I think. I think when I do women's work, it helps to create this web of interconnection between women that's just getting healthier and holier and more saturated with truth.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. And I think the world will be a much better place with more and more of these interconnected webs of women.
Yeah, totally. I
Yeah.
really commend you for that. And correct me, and I hope I'm wrong, but you only got a few minutes with us, right?
Yeah, like 10, like 11 minutes. 10
Okay,
minutes and 30
cool. Right on, right on. So, I mean, yeah, just I guess we kind of got to wrap it up a little bit, but Leslie and I might be able to stick around for a little bit later to hang on, but yeah, so anything else you want to share with us in regards to, how even your services or your insights and your observations of, all these divisiveness things going on with, subject matter amongst women, my dear, wonderful females, that for me as a man, I've just been kind of like Dionysus growing up, not like Odysseus in Greek mythos, but you know, feeling like I had to like go through certain rites of initiation with a woman to like gain certain wisdom in this lifetime and this and that, and sometimes just like it took me 19 years before I lost my virginity. I've had like really long stints of celibacy, and just like sometimes realizing like, whoa, how come as a man I'm more like in touch with my inner yoni, balance within my feminine than more like a lot of females I see out there in the real world. Like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
And yes, we understand the reality feels it is pretty ass backwards in this, matrix shitstem situation that we're living in. But yeah, to cut it short, anything on that? Like,
Totally. I mean, I think the most important thing for women is to be really discerning. There's so many teachings out there about connecting to your divine feminine, becoming an embodied woman. There's so many containers that actually aren't being held in true safety and true integrity. And so I think that it's really important for women to sharpen in on their own discernment and to ask questions and to gain clarity and just maybe even really attune to, if they're thinking about working with someone, if they're thinking about going into an experience, a women's circle, a women's retreat, to just really get clear on the person's energy who's leading that, because the worst thing that can happen is a woman choosing to go on a women's retreat and having an absolutely awful experience where space wasn't held in a correct way. I mean, that can be like really damaging. And I've spoke to women who have had those kinds of experiences, and it's hard because it breaks trust, right? It just like breaks more trust. You think you're going to a women's retreat to get healing and experience sisterhood, and actually like you were left out the whole time, and the leader was only talking about herself and her experiences and her everything. And that happens. That's a part of like just seeing what's taking place in this industry. And then also with that is, while we're working with our own feminine essence, part of discernment is also working with our masculine structure and our masculine boundaries, and getting really clear on knowing what we're available for, getting really clear on beginning to use our voice and saying no to what we're genuinely not comfortable for, what we're not ready for, what we're not open to, what we're not available for, and just aiming into that part of ourself. And yeah, um, I just pray for women. I pray for women so hard.
we do too, yeah.
Um,
There's a lot of trickery out
And
there and a lot of forces like misleading people.
Yeah.
And, like you were saying earlier, there's this huge sort of rise of this like hostility, anger, bitterness towards the patriarchy that I've been noticing. And I'm seeing it as becoming much more divisive, not only between men and women, but between women and among women and within women. And that there's a lot of confusion around how do you have that balanced masculine and feminine within without being overly masculinized in this world.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really valid question. And I think even me, like I'm still learning I'm not going to say that like I'm perfect. I'm still learning the balance between that. And when I can just tell that when I'm really pulled into my masculine side, I just feel fucking drained. I feel absolutely drained. I feel like I'm totally in my control body. And you know what helps with filling up your feminine? Being around women.
Yes.
Like,
So
if
true.
anything's going to fill up your cup more, it's finding a good group of women to be around. There's so many resources out here now. There's so many different women's groups that you can, I mean, wherever you are in the world, you can go on Facebook and look up women's groups near me, and there's so many different ones. And again, like, use your discernment, try them out, see what they're speaking to, connect with them in person, see how it feels. There's online women's stuff as well. But I also think it's really important that women know that, there's this back and forth between leadership between men and women, and men lead the women, but women also lead the men. And so it's like back and forth that we both nurture each other. And so if a woman's constantly complaining about the men in her life and like how men are shit and every single man that she dates is crappy and like they're all pieces of shit and blah blah blah, like, to me that's not telling me anything about the men. That's revealing to me something about the woman. What part of you is attracting that? What part of you is allowing that? What part of you is accepting that? And who do you actually get to become in order to be a magnet for a man that's going to match you in an embodied and aligned way?
Sounds like the law of attraction, which it sounds like you mentioned in your natural law guidebook, which obviously I'm featuring right there on the screen.
Yes.
If you know what I mean. Keeping it hermetically sealed on a scene, possibly.
How has your study of natural law influenced your work with women?
How has natural law influenced my work with women? Wow, that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I just feel like natural law has really influenced my life as a whole. And I think that I definitely, you know what? I don't really teach like a ton of natural law to women, but I do weave in principles of like thinking for yourself and creating your own reality and questioning things and noticing the pendulum and being able to find balance in things. And I really think that understanding natural law, cosmic law, God's law, Hermeticism has really brought me back into my own center and my own understanding of truth in the world, which has helped me just become a better teacher and a better facilitator in spaces, ultimately. Much more grounded individual.
Yeah. I think as we study nature, as we study ourselves, we're learning about nature, and maybe learning about natural law from our own study,
Nature
in some way.
Nature is so perfect. Yeah. It's so perfect when we look at it, just from a completely like unobscured way. You can learn so much from it. And anybody listening, if you desire to, explore a little bit more intimately with nature, a really cool practice that you can do is find one thing out in nature that intimidates you. For a lot of women that I work with, it's bugs. And sit with that. Sit with it for an hour to 2 hours. Observe it. Observe the spider for an hour or 2 hours and see what you learn from it. Because that's a function of you as well.
Yeah, I love that. So tell us more about your offerings and where people can find you.
Yeah. So you can find me on my current website, which is anjaliromanek.com.
I'm sorry, this is something I want to mention in the very beginning, but I didn't get to mention anything in the intro. This whole QR code that's been on the top left corner, that's been your website the whole time. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah, I didn't have.
Just take a picture of it.
Doesn't give me enough time or space to write, Anjali's website without being all weird. But, anyways.
No worries. Yeah. I really appreciate that. I think that's so cool. I mean, either way.
So you got that website, you got your yoga website, and something else. Sorry, continue. I cut you off. So yeah, you're good.
It's okay. I'm so you can find, more information about me and about my offerings on my website, anjaliromanek.com. I have 2 retreats that are coming up right now. I have one in Bali, Indonesia, which is in October from the 15th to the 21st. If you've never been to Bali, it's an absolutely incredible place. And then I am hosting another retreat in Hawaii, next May from the 11th to the 18th that I just announced. And I also have a podcast called the Radical Woman Podcast, where I just speak to some very radical topics, and I have women come and share their different stories. I've had women talk all about different things, so I'm not even going to list them. You can go on there and check. It's on iTunes and Spotify. And Instagram is my main jam. That's where I connect with people the most. It's where I share updates about my life the most. It's where I share a lot of my own content. So you can connect with me at Instagram. My name is just I am Anjali Romanek. And and then just to end this, I want to share why Radical Woman is turning into a big brand for me. Eventually, my website will be called radicalwoman.com or something along those lines. And I just want to speak to, women who are listening and moving through this journey of connecting to their most empowered, the most embodied, their most awakened self, is allowing yourself to go through this process of, an archetypal Jungian terms. It's made into mother, but I decided to add in a second step, which is maiden to sovereign woman, and then down the line. What my brand Radical Woman represents is moving from the maiden phase into an embodied feminine state, and then moving through the rest of your life within that energy.
Beautiful. It sounds very much like a rite of passage experience, an opportunity for women to have this rite of passage into knowing themselves to be their highest potential in the world.
Yes, that's exactly
wonderful.
Yeah,
that's great.
Passage.
Yeah, I really value everything you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed sharing and talk about women forever. I love women.
We do too.
Yeah, your retreat sounds so good. Yeah. I'm gonna
go. Especially in those exotic places, and I hope it's not. I'm sure it's off the beaten path in Bali. I know there's a lot of stigma, like people in France over here, they know Bali's like flooded full of tourists in certain areas. So
yeah, I mean, I would
good spots like in Costa Rica in the past. I've seen some photos. We're gonna highlight some of that and some of the outro for you, so folks can know about that. So
yeah. I mean, Bali's main, their whole economy is based off of tourism, but so is Costa Rica's. 80% of Costa Rica's economy is based on.
Yes, we're helping them as well.
Doesn't mean, I mean, even Hawaii. So it's right. It's like all of these places that I'm choosing, like their base economy is from tourism, but it doesn't negate the fact that these places on the earth hold really significant energetic power. And each location is chosen for a specific purpose. So Costa Rica was like return to the wild. We saw boa constrictors. We saw scorpions. We did a sweat lodge ceremony. We just like went into the wild. We did like sacred rage release. It was intense. And Kauai is like more like radiance, like connecting to feminine radiance, nourishment, to like softness, receptivity, openness, lushness. So every retreat has a different theme to it, a different energetic baseline to it to serve a different woman.
I love that. I like that you're putting that level of attention to match the flavor of the location with the aspect of women that you're focusing on. The development.
Because every woman's at a different stage of development. You know, the wild sacred rage isn't going to be for everyone right now.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Is there a particular order at all to those retreats, or
not as of right now, but maybe there will be in the future, you know, as they progress and as I get clearer and sharper.
That's exciting. I'll keep an eye on the development of your work. I really think it's great. I've seen you grow really fast, actually.
Really?
From when I was on a call with you, end of 2020 or something, and you were just like starting this. So you've come a long way, and it's fantastic.
Thank you. Sometimes it feels like I'm just crawling. But I really am receiving that reflection. Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Whether it be crawling or
Appreciate
striding, you're stepping in the right direction, and that's much love and respect then with all that. So yeah, Anjali, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule and everything. Salute to your partner out there, Mr. Watson. We know that cat too, so yeah.
He's coming back soon.
Oh, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah,
that's good news.
It's only a matter of time now. He's like,
we all need a little breaks here and there. But
excellent.
All right, y'all. All right, in truth, love, and liberation. Talk next time.
Yeah. Bye. Till next time. Bye-bye.